Dr. Pill. She joined the Institute for Research and Reproduction as a senior research officer and started the Department of Clinical Endocrinology and Infertility. She successfully spearheaded projects like Maitri for post-menopausal movement and Shield for the enlightenment for school children. Over to you, ma'am.
So, am I heard properly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. At the outset, would like to thank Dr. Pai and his colleagues, Ms. Dolly, Ms. Prerna, and Ms. Anuja. And from MWA, Dr. Durai Raj and Dr. Swati Shukla. This presentation is prepared collectively by Dr. Shuk Vaidya, myself, and Dr. Shubha Udupi, who is currently Research Director at Kasturba Society Medical Research Center. And in the next slide, would like to show that really Kasturba Society Medical Research Center, and this slide was made some years back. It's an integrated vision and endeavor for biomedical research where ancient insights and modern discoveries principle guide us. And you can see in this faculty with the president of Kasturba Society, Dhirubhai Mehta, sitting there, Dr. Vaidya. And we have 4 very senior Ayurvedic consultants and researchers, which we call them as Vaidya scientists, Dr. Ashwini Kumar Raut, Dr. Nutan Nabar, Dr. Ashish Phadke, and Dr. Kalpana Dorisha. And from the modern medical side, we have Dr. Deepak Dave, Dr. Jayashree Joshi, Dr. Vaidya and myself, and now recently we have a dermatologist, a very senior dermatologist, Dr. Gulrez. From the biomedical stream, we have Dr. Amonkar and Dr. Prajakta. Dr. Chaya Godse is already left to and gone to the industry, Shubhada and others. And very not so recently, we have worked together for years together. That's nutrition scientists of great repute, Dr. Shubha Udupi and her colleagues. With this, the next slide would show you that today I would like to cover some of the points in greater details and some I'll just touch upon. We'll talk about the genesis, definition, scope of Ayurveda. And true, the Bharat is a rich heritage of Ayurveda health wisdom. And there's a spectrum of pleiotropic activity that arises from Ahar to Aushad in R&D paths. And I'm so glad that Dr. Pai this afternoon, emphasized that research is equally important besides research and development in this field, is this domain. Seasonal health foods and value as Ayurveda, dietary individualization during illness and convalescence, Ayurveda, health promotion, preventive and therapeutic, and global impact of unique Ayurveda on R&D. Next slide, please. So genesis of nutraceuticals, probably all of you know, but it was nice for me to read a little more in details that Stephen D. Fallis in 1976 created a non-profit organization established in that time to accelerate medical discovery by establishing a more productive clinical research community. And I would like to emphasize for all of you, it is so important to emphasize clinical research community participation. He coined the word nutraceutic in 1989. The next slide shows that Ayurvedicals were announced as a entity synergizing with nutraceutical for the wellness of society at a function, Lifetime Achievement Award given to Dr. Shuk Vaidya at the 5th Nutraceutical Summit 2009 New Delhi. Next slide, please. So this somewhere I would say is my comfort zone, the comfort zone that comes through those who have been nurtured in that era in which at home remedies were prevalent and which were arising uh, from the community awareness that was given by Vaidyas and Ayurveda. And there was a time when I wanted to work on puberty menorrhagia. I was approached by Anand Puranik ji from Rutupapeshwar that would you like to work on our product for its anti-menorrhagic property and efficacy. And we thought that we can get best to reach to a cohort for the puberty menorrhagia only if we go to schools. And we did, and we think that it is very important that whenever we reach out to community for our purpose, we should see what we can give in back to that community. And we had thought that school health education and enlightened living program, where there were Saptashil program, and it had health education covering 7 topics. And I will not go into the detail of those, but at that time, we helped the students to set up a exhibition on Saturday and Sunday where they had displayed their various aspects of this Saptashil program. One of that was on nutrition and kitchen gardening. And at that time, on the final day of the event, I was asked to give an address, and it just occurred to me, and I spoke out. Cooking is an art. Don't ask me whether I have that art or not. Diet is a culture, and nutrition is a science. How rich we are in our diets, to our thali. Sumati Budambi, I don't know whether anyone of you remember her, but from SNDT had written about the eulogy about thali as a optimum nutrition from day-to-day basis, from morning to night, whatever we eat. How much was there wisdom in that thali? In 70s in United States, when I was there, I was exposed to this food pyramid, which was an old food pyramid, and now new food pyramid has come. But I think they have learned about the thali concept, and that's why you see this as a plate where the proportions are given to the macro and micronutrients. Now, new food pyramid has included physical activity. We always knew Shakpavli, Karnache, Faide, Aplala Maida Ahis. Next slide, please. So, defining nutraceuticals, they're really industry business, which combine pharmaceutical dosage forms to the nutritional supplements with health claims. But Ayurceuticals that are Ayush-based, that is Ayurvedic, Unani and Siddha-based, culture-specific food supplements, which have quality, safety, and activity for the defined indications. In the next slide, please. So it is a subset of the universe of food supplements where it is governed by the regulatory FSSAI, and they are the products with documented quality, safety, and efficacy based on the principles and practice of Ayurveda, Unani, and Siddha, with very important consensual and congruent validity of Nutra-Ayurveda. The scope of R&D in Ayurceuticals is immense in view of the vast therapeutic clinical usage of Ayurvedic drugs in India. However, presently, as the local and global markets are humongous, still, the current focus is more on a rapid product development than basic R&D. And I'm very glad again, and I'm repeating that Dr. Pai did tell us today that there should be a focus on research. The unmet global needs of healthcare are health of pregnant women, health of elderly, metabolic and degenerative diseases, health development of children, and complementary therapy in cancer, allergy, stress, viral disease, and immune disorders. Today we'll be focusing to some extent on health of pregnant women and metabolic and degenerative diseases and cancer. The next slide, please. So here we find that the Global Knowledge Society Integral Knowledge for Development was nicely spoken by Dr. Abdul Kalam in Ignited Minds says, Knowledge has always been a prime mover of prosperity and power. In the 21st century, a new society is emerging where knowledge is primary production resource instead of capital and labor. Efficient utilization of this existing knowledge base can create wealth for us in the form of better health, education, and other indicators of progress. Whether a nation qualifies as a knowledge society is judged by how effectively it deals with knowledge creation and knowledge development. And it is really nice. I have read about Professor Oppenheimer, father of atomic bomb, how much he writes in eulogy about the Vedas and Gita. Access to the Vedas is the greatest privilege this century may claim over all previous centuries. The next slide, please. So in Charak, Bhagavad, and other classics of Ayurveda, who is an expert on drugs? Only a few understand medicines thoroughly. One who knows their identity, characteristics, and combinations of usage is called an expert on drugs. And what is an appropriate drug? One that has a potential for multiple formulations and uses with multiple good properties and potency is called appropriate drug. Wherein the beneficial and adverse influences leading to a healthy or a diseased life and their respective modalities, helpful or harmful, are described and measured. That is called Ayurveda. Next slide, please. So there is a spectrum of Ahar to Avshada. And in these 4 columns, you see how Ahar moves towards Avshada. Of the same Amlaki fruit, which is Ahar, Ahar Aushad Amlaki Swaras, Aushad Ahar Chavanpras, and Aushad is Amlaki Rasayan. Ginger as spice, Alepak, and there I would say that these are some of the seasonal foods of medicinal value. Then from Ahar Aushad to Aushad Ahar, Shunti, and then Nagardi Kwat as Aushad. Haridra, a spice in our daily cooking. Haridra with milk as a Ahar Aushad. Aushad Ahar as pickled Haridra, and Nisha Amlaki. At CSR Limitly project that we had worked for Nisha Amlaki in diabetes mellitus and newly detected or treated not and pre-diabetic states also. And it was found to have insulin sensitization. Next slide, please. So Ayurvedic indications. Now I'm going to dwell quite a bit on Dadim. What was fascinating to me the other day when we were discussing about something else, that something that we all throw away and the peels, but they are really having so many bioactives in peels of fruits that we throw away. And even in the Dadim as a fruit of medicinal value has been described, and it has been used in Hriday Rog, Gulm, Ash, Grani, and Pandurung. So there are multiple indications of the same fruit. Next slide, please. And an excellent article in 2002 June in Frontiers in Nutrition, where they talk about pomegranate peel as a source of bioactive compounds. It's a mini review on their physiological functions. But look at this. It has polyphenols, which is occupying almost half the pie of this entire diagram, with a dietary fiber and others as the rest. And the indications that are given here is to improve cardiovascular health, anti-tumoral, anti-inflammatory properties, antioxidant properties, antimicrobial, and improve skin health, improves oral health, as we will see in the next few slides. Next slide, please. There are systematic reviews and meta-analysis of the effects of Punica granitarum on a spectrum of non-communicable diseases. India is facing double whammy of infectious diseases at the same time non-communicable diseases. And metabolic syndrome is, if we are considered as diabetic capital of the world, we are not behind in metabolic syndrome either. And so pomegranate and metabolic syndrome risk factors and outcomes are systematic review in clinical studies. I'll go a little bit in detail a little later on this. Effect of pomegranate juice on vascular adhesion factors. Then its effect in cancer prevention and intervention through its multiple targets on oncogenic and oncosuppressive signals. Pharmacological and therapeutic properties of Punica granulatum phytochemicals on possible role in breast cancer. The next slide, please. So let's first find out what is a metabolic syndrome. It is a central obesity where waist circumference for we Indians and females, it is more than 80 centimeters with any two of the following, like triglycerides more than 150 milligram per DL, or the patient may be already in the specific treatment for lipid abnormality, HDL cholesterol which is lower than 50 ml, or is on a treatment, blood pressure on antihypertensive treatment, or has more than 130 or diastolic more than 85, and fasting plasma glucose more than 100 milligram per DL, or previously diagnosed type 2 diabetes, and OGTT to identify GT. WHO actually also includes here insulin. And I do feel, because we have a lot of experience of comparing HbA1c with the HOMA-IR as well with the stimulated 2R insulin. And in a large number of cases, we find that you may not find any other abnormality other than at 2 hours, glucose-stimulated insulin is high. That's a delayed hyperinsulinemia that we talk about. And that is diabetes in situ, much more before a pre-diabetic state is diagnosed by HbA1c. Next slide, please. So in our Maitri data, which was a module for menopausal healthcare, in that, you find that a large number had metabolic syndrome, 42.6%, with hypertension in 41%, increased TG, and it is very, very well known also, and you can find here also reflecting that the low HDL is found in almost close to 50%. Known cases of diabetes or newly detected were 15%. Next slide, please. And very important that waist circumference is much more important for as a 23, and but may have almost in the range of 90 centimeters as waist circumference. So the central obesity sometimes, the BMI may hide this metabolic dysfunction, which can be revealed by waist circumference, a very important marker of the underlying metabolic dysfunction. Next slide, please. So again, I'm very, very fond of this slide, and I would like to focus a little bit on this, that in search of a germ theory equivalent for chronic disease, because we all know that it is the inflammation that will happen, classic acute infectious response, immune defense, and then there will be a disease resolution and basal homeostasis. This is by microbial pathogen antigens, the germ theory. But what is the theory for the metabolic syndrome or for chronic inflammation? And most of these NCDs are really chronic inflammatory diseases. And here you find that the mechanisms are oxidative stress and insulin resistance. But what are the inorganic anthropogen inducers? These inducers are lifestyle inducers: obesity, adiposity, sleep deprivation, stress, and such are the inorganic anthropogen inducers. And so there's a chronic allostasis. And we had asked the question, is polycystic ovarian syndrome an inflammatory disease? And you see that picture shows so well, classic inflammation is like a raging fire. And chronic inflammatory disease is a meta-inflammation, smoldering fire. In our 90 patients of PCOS, more than 75% had insulin resistance. This inflammation, chronic inflammation, can be easily diagnosed even if you do CBC. Those who have obesity obviously are insulin resistant by and large, and they may have high WBC count, leukocytosis. But in our 6 cases from 30 who had shown leukocytosis, one of them was thin and lean, and we hardly expected her to have leukocytosis. Looked at her insulin levels, they were sky high. Insulin resistance was there. The next slide, let's look at smoldering inflammation is central to chronic diseases. And that is the basis for cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, pulmonary diseases, arthritis, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, diabetes, and cancer. And the next slide will show that in our 43 cases of PCOS, we had done healthy controls for 25. And if you see here in the red color is the control and the rest is PCOS. Insulin of FGFI ratio is seen, or insulin fasting is seen, and FGFI ratio is seen. That profiling shows hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. Leptin is high. Adiponectin, which is a cardioprotective, was low, and CRP was high. So there is this, definitely we have markers for chronic inflammation as well as insulin, hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistant in PCO patients. Next slide. So it was very important for me to see that now this meta-analysis or systematic review of clinical studies, which says that pomegranate has a metabolic syndrome risk factors and outcomes. Let us look at closely what did they come up with. They had screened about 2,458 records, and finally 20 studies, RCTs, were included by the PRISMA, the guidelines for systematic review. Of this, 828 PCOs were the maximum, 136, and obese 146, of course. So the biomarkers that they had studied was BMI, total cholesterol, lipids, fasting blood sugar, insulin, HOMA-IR, and in some they had also looked at the CRP, excess CRP, and interleukin-6. The results in PCOS showed that pomegranate intervention improved metabolic, oxidative, hemodynamic, and inflammatory characteristics of the treated women. This study was triple blind and sample size was calculated. However, when I looked at it carefully, the sample size could have been a little better. Studies in vitro and vivo and a few clinical trials, however, it cannot be offered as monotherapy. But I think that further work definitely needs to be done. And this could be in-depth clinical studies through nutraepidemiological, Ayurvedic pharmacoepidemiological, and reverse pharmacology. We have such immense possibilities for such. And Dr. Pai, I would again re-emphasize what you said, that we must involve much more integrative work where Ayurvedic physicians and experts, biomedical colleagues, and the modern diabetologists and those who are in gynecologists and reproductive endocrinologists who are doing work in PCOS. Because polycystic ovarian syndrome really is the epidemic right now in India, and it generates the metabolic syndrome it multiplies because gestational diabetes occurs with big babies and already a high risk for the PCOS if they're females. So pomegranate and metabolic syndrome risk factors and outcomes, a systemic review was an interesting one in Nutrients 2022. Next slide, please. So then its role in breast cancer. Now, some properties in methanol extracts of pomegranate pericarp is an important one because it has an anti-estrogenic activity. Also, it's like aromatase inhibitors. And so it has a place and had been shown in vitro, in vivo studies. Genstin treatment induced cell cycle arrest in breast cancer cell lines with low estrogen receptor alpha to estrogen receptor beta ratio and also improved mitochondrial functionality. Quercetin decreases the resistance to the existing anti-cancer drug like adriamycin, and there the breast cancer cell lines, specific ones have been used, which were ADR resistant breast cancer cell lines. And there are also polyphenols that inhibit the activity of 17-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase from 30% to 79%. And amongst the allergen-derived compounds, urolithin A, urolithin B, gallic acid, allergic acid, etc., urolithin B exhibited the most significant anti-aromatase activity and inhibited proliferation of the cell lines, which was ER plus MC7. Next slide, please. So anti-cancer mechanism for punica are regarding its anti-estrogenic effects, fermented pomegranate juice, and had inhibited in several breast cancer cell lines. Also inhibited the estrogenic activity of 17-beta estradiol by 55%. Also, it has inhibited the invasion process and induced apoptosis in other metastatic human breast cancer cell lines. Pomegranate emulsion induced anti-proliferative and pro-apoptotic effects in tumor cell cultures. Next slide, please. So R&D paths from Ayurveda is Ayurvedic nutraceutics can take towards the reverse nutraceutics experience. Observational therapies, observation studies are extremely important. If you keep good records, and here I would emphasize that more epidemiological studies need to be done because these are being used day in and day out, and in what form, and Ayurvedic pharmacoepidemiology particularly, this as a person from modern medical science, I was very impressed that pharmacovigilance is not as much required by us, more pharmacoepidemiological for safety, for activity is required rather than vigilance. Because thalidomide tragedy is not occurring day in and day out in our country. And not many drugs by its introduction into the market are not withdrawn within 6 months after its introduction, in spite of the several clinical pharmacological studies and also up to the phase 3 clinical pharmacological studies. So if we say that if there is a perception for safety, we should document that. And that could come through pharmacoepidemiological studies of Ayurveda, also neuroepidemiology. Next slide, please. So reverse nutraceutics, Aushad, phytopharmaceutics, and Ayurvedics. I think in our country, if I'm not mistaken, phytopharmaceutics has gone like a NCE, and it requires different regulatory agency looking into than the Ayurvedics. And so I think that it depends upon where one wants to invest time, energy, resources, would depend upon which stream regulatory mechanisms are going to be involved in the R&D that you are embarking upon. So if Amlaki Rasayan, anti-tuberculosis treatment is a phytopharmaceutical and energy bar as Ayurvedical, Nagardi Kwant as Aushad, motion sickness as phytopharmaceutical and digestive wine, Nisha Amlaki in diabetes, because we had used as DMFN01, and that would have gone as a phytopharmaceutical, while Ayurvedical would be Nish Alar. This name has been given, this slide has been prepared by Dr. Vaidya. I may not be knowing much, but it is an urticaria and allergy. Next slide, please.
Dr. Rama Vaidya.
Yeah.
We are running out of time.
So this last slide are 3 slides.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Use of krotlu as a traditional food by Gujarati new mothers. And I really request that this kind of generation studies can be done, a study of 3 generations. And Cartlu has been used for a postpartum, during lactation, postpartum period for involution of the uterus and galactagogic effect. The next slide. And This was being prepared. Triple domain of Ayurveda, conventional medicine, and nutrition science have come together to build a strong foundation for evolving this kind of activity. Next slide. Okay, next. Yeah, so the Cartlo has actually 32, here it is written 30, but it has 32 medicinal herbs with ghee and jaggery. I will not go into the details of this. Next slide, please. And this is the last one. So trilateral quest and impact for Ayurveda is required, and that's why collaborative domains and stakeholders, academia, government and industry, and R&D part has been already emphasized. The next. Many thanks, and sorry for the delay that I've caused and taken some more time.
Actually, we wish that we had more time. It is such an interesting and very useful presentation. So there are a lot of people who wanted to know a lot more information on this.
Yeah, I would love if somebody would have asked one question and I would have had an opportunity to answer. Because
there
I
are
see
several.
that, the problem that we clinical colleagues or clinical experts, I consider myself a clinical scientist, we don't have an opportunity to interact with the basic either nutrition science people. At our place is a different story, but otherwise. And so I would have loved if some question has come up and if you can pick up one question and I can answer that.
Okay. Now let me ask you one question, which possibly is bothering a lot of people, that many doctors reject supplements to, especially some of these nutraceuticals and ayurveda, and they prefer medicines rather than the supplements or nutraceuticals. Can you comment on that? How we can create awareness about the efficacy and usefulness of these ayurveda?
I think working with them. See, if you see medical colleges from any plural system of medicine, we don't have nutrition as a subject only, first of all. Important. And that's why what I feel that this kind of a gap can be only by bridge building, investing time, energy, and resources for the younger minds to be influenced and having projects. And projects will not be rejected, but we don't come out for research projects. And so even this Ayurvedic pharmacoepidemiology, right now there are only two people, Girish Tillu and Nutan Nagar. There are more people needed. We have spent money on pharmacovigilance. WHO sponsored it, that's why. But why can't we tell? We don't have that much of a problem for pharmacovigilance. We need this. So my answer to you, Dr. Pai, is that by working with them,
I think I would also request that if we can go to them and probably start a dialogue. If they don't want to hear us, we can go and start creating awareness at whatever platform that we can, so that people after some time will realize the importance of these substances, which are already there in nature, rather than trying to synthesize something which is untested or unknown to nature. Yeah, I think.
So I would ask a counter question. How did you persuade me to come on this platform?
I think that is a beginning, and probably I'll come more often to bring you on such platforms. So thank you very much. There are many more questions, but I think there are many more speakers as well.
I'm sure that Dolly could keep those and send it to me. I would be very happy.
We will do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Dolly?
Yes, sir.
Can we go to the next speaker? Thank Dr. Rama Vaidya.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Vaidya, for that excellent presentation. It was indeed quite insightful, and we have got plenty of questions which I will forward it to you.
Please do. Thank you.
Moving ahead, I would now like to invite the next speaker of today's session, Dr. Sudarshan Rao, to talk on safety and efficacy of nutraceuticals. I would like to take a few minutes to introduce the speaker to you all. Dr. Sudarshan Rao is a former Deputy Director, National Institute of Nutrition, Hyderabad, India. He is a Chairman Scientific Panel on Biological Hazards at FSSAI. He has more than 100 publications on various aspects of food safety in peer-reviewed journals and proceeding, 20 chapters in book and 10 reports. Honored with Kejriwal Award from All India Food Processors Association in 1997 for his work on HACCP. Platinum Award for his strategy on street foods from futuristic cities in 2010. Served as an expert member of Joint FAO WHO Expert Committee on Food Additives and FAO consultant on